It is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, Giulia Panozzo, the founder of Neuroscience. Giulia's journey from being a neuroscientist to an accomplished SEO professional has equipped her with a unique perspective on the intersection of data analytics, consumer behavior, and machine learning. Giulia is a bilingual digital marketer with a deep passion for neuroeconomics, consumer behavior, and the impact of SEO strategies. Her performance-driven mindset, attention to details, and expertise in data analytics make her a highly sought-after professional in the industry. Today, Giulia will be sharing her insights on the topic how to show the impact of your SEO changes with Causal Impact. It will be a recorded video, but you can leave your questions in the chat. Giulia will answer them a little bit later. Her session promises to provide valuable insights and practical applications for showcasing the impact of SEO changes using Causal Impact analysis. Okay, welcome, Giulia.
Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great SEO day. My name is Giulia and today I'm going to talk about how to show the impact of your SEO changes with Causal Impact. A bit more about me before we dive in. I'm an in-house director of customer acquisition. I'm a public speaker on the topics of SEO, test and learns, and neuromarketing. And I recently founded my own consultancy called Neuroscientive. So a lot of my day-to-day requires me to report results to stakeholders. So what I aim at doing today is to show you how you can leverage statistics to analyze test results, show the impact of your work, and potentially make a case for bigger changes. A few of you will be familiar with Causal Impact already, but for those of you who aren't, Causal Impact is a package that allows us to analyze a time series dataset and draw inferences on how much a change has affected our variable of choice, as compared to the predicted outcome. And it also determines if it's a statistically significant effect or not. So in today's talk, we're going to see a few topics. First, what does Causal Impact do in practice? Then, why should you care about using Causal Impact and leveraging statistics? Then how can it help your strategy as a marketer? And finally, we're running a demo on how to run an analysis with Causal Impact. And we're gonna also discuss some caveats on using statistics in the real world. So let's see first what Causal Impact does in practice. Say that you're running a simple title change test on your pages, for example, and you want to add a price point so that your title mentions little black dresses from £15. Once you apply the changes, the data that we have at hand are normally from Google Search Console, Google Analytics, and so on. And while we can sometimes see a trend following our change, it might be difficult to actually quantify by how much our change has affected a variable of interest. Say, for example, that here we're measuring clicks. So what Causal Impact does in practice is to help overcome these challenges by taking the export of our data, which might look like this, and analyzing the performance from the period before the change and the performance after the change to give you a graph that, if you're lucky and your test is a winner, will look like this. So you can see very clearly the sort of impact that it caused. Another great benefit of Causal Impact is that it not only shows you the effect, but quantifies the percentage of it and also determines if it's a statistically significant effect or not. And at this stage, you might be wondering why you should care about quantifying an effect and understanding its statistical significance. And I can promise that I asked myself that as well a few times. But mainly because testing is already hard as it is. I ran a poll on Twitter and on LinkedIn asking my peers what they found to be the most challenging part of running a test. And while initially I thought this would have swinged one way or the other, I found that people found that a lot of aspects actually were challenging when running a test. So most people did say that analyzing and trusting the results was the hardest part. So having a model that can take care of that for us, like Causal Impact, and can help us clear most concerns in that department. However, another point that was brought up was resources, cost, so keep that in mind, and business buy-in, which is actually a pretty big one here. And whether you work in-house or for an agency, your stakeholders will most likely always ask for a forecast of the estimated win before they spend money, time, and resources on any initiatives or strategy changes. And as SEOs, it's always a bit tricky to provide clear answers. So if we take the same example as earlier, the title change to bring more clicks in, the one question you might get before you get signed in is, will this help bring more traffic in? And as SEOs, we're really familiar with one answer, really. It depends. However, with Causal Impact, you can get rid of the blanket "it depends" answer and actually provide a data-driven yes or no answer with a certain degree of confidence so that you can drive changes at scale. So at the next question, will it work or will this help bring more traffic in? Based on your results, you can actually say, well, most likely yes, or most likely no. So we just saw that the first reason you should care about Causal Impact is that it's reliable and it helps us make informed decisions. But there are two other reasons why I like to use it. The second reason is that it's versatile. So you can use it on a number of 8 other data sets as long as it's a time series data. For example, you can run it to analyze how changes to an app impact the number of app installs, like William Martin did for this paper at UCL. Then you can use it to infer the impact of influencer campaigns, for example. And in general, you can use it to infer the effect on an offline campaign where no ID tracking is carried out. So, for example, it's being used by the podcast Data Skeptic to infer the effect of Adele's appearance at the Saturday Night Live show on the page views of her Wikipedia page. And in general, you can use it on almost any time series data, but you might want to focus only on upper funnel metrics like site views, sessions, and users, since for deeper metrics like transactions or signups, there are a number of layers that might influence performance that could be difficult to. And finally, the third reason why I like to use Causal Impact, if you remember, someone in my poll mentioned the cost associated with running a test being one of the challenges they faced when running a test. So Causal Impact is free if you run it on RStudio, which I'm going to demo shortly. And there are a number of tools that now integrate Bayesian statistics to measure the impact of a split test. However, they likely come at a cost. And if you want to amaze your stakeholders without asking for a budget, then Causal Impact on R is the way to go. So now that we clear that statistics is important and that Causal Impact is reliable, versatile, and free, we can get a bit more into the details of what the package actually looks like and how you can use it. So our Causal Impact plot looks like this. And what Causal Impact is, as we mentioned, an extremely powerful package developed by Google to infer the cumulative impact of a change or of a treatment in a time series. It's based on a statistical model called Bayesian structural time series, which uses prior information to predict the outcome of a metric in the absence of the treatment. And this prediction is called the counterfactual. And then it compares the expected results, so the counterfactual, to the actual result and uses their difference to estimate the effect of a change. So to better understand this, let's have a look at the graphs. The first panel shows the actual data, the full black line, whereas the dotted horizontal line represents the counterfactual prediction for the post-treatment period based on the performance of the prior period. In this graph, the vertical dotted line represents the launch date, so the time at which the treatment or the change was implemented. So, for example, in our title change test, that would be the date that the new title went live on the page. In the second panel, we can see the difference between the observed data and the counterfactual prediction. This is the point-wise causal effect as estimated by the model. And finally, the third panel adds the point-wise contributions from the second panel to calculate the cumulative effect of the change. So to summarize, always using the example of the title change, the dotted horizontal line represents the expected clicks based on the number of clicks we had prior to the change and the control groups. The solid line is the actual clicks performance, and the blue area around the lines is the fluctuations, so the margin of error as predicted by the model. And these are some of the scenarios that Causal Impact can help us in. Especially in the case of a test being a winner, like in the example here, it can be used on any areas where changes in strategy need to be validated by test results first. It's great to clearly show stakeholders the impact of your work, especially when their measure of success is ranking first on Google across all keywords for the more unfamiliar stakeholders to SEO. And then it can help forecast the direction of changes at scale and make a case for more resources. However, there will be times where the test is a loser, like in this case, but there's some learnings to be taken from there too. Because by clearly identifying a winner or a loser, so knowing if a test works or not, we can start making inferences on what works and doesn't work with our audience and direct our efforts more strategically. So now we'll see causal impact in action and demo how to run an analysis on RStudio. So the first thing to do is to download RStudio, and you will need to download R first and then RStudio. And once everything is ready, your environment will look pretty much like this. So you will see on the right side in the bottom panel, there's a packages tab. You want to click on that and you will find uninstalled packages. You will have to look for Causal Impact. That will give you all of the libraries that you will need to run the analysis, so go ahead and install it. The second thing you want to do is to prepare your data. So for example, a lot of the data that you might want to work with is from Google Search Console or Google Analytics. Here, for simplicity, we're going to go with an example from Google Search Console, and these will be sort of the data that you will have to work with. This is the basic export. So the first thing you want to do with that is to focus on one single variable. So instead of having clicks, impressions, position, etc., you want to choose, for example, only clicks. If you have control groups, that's a place where you can place the control groups as well. But otherwise, you will just have the first two columns. So the date and the clicks of the test group. You will see that the date is sorted in descendant mode. That means that the most recent dates needs to be at the bottom. And a few things to consider when sorting your data. The first column needs to be your test group. In this export, it's the second column, but I'm gonna take away the date in the actual analysis, and we're gonna show how in a second. The other columns after the test group can be used as control groups if they are a good fit and if you have control groups. Then the pre-period should be at least twice as long as the post-period to allow the model to plot the actual versus the predicted outcome. This means that if I'm running a check-in after 2 weeks after the launch, I don't want to grab only the data of the 2 weeks post-launch and pre-launch, but I want 6 weeks worth of data, with 2 weeks being after the launch and 4 weeks being the ones before the launch, so that the model can actually plot the predicted performance in an accurate way. And finally, any columns with zeros should be either removed or corrected, but there's a caveat to be made here. If there is an isolated zero in the test group column, then you can subtract a unit from the day before or after, making sure then that the test scripts work. However, if there are more instances of a zero in the same column, then it means that our data set is not the right fit, and there's not enough data to be worked with. So we don't want to add too much data manipulation on that. So probably choosing another group is the best option. So once you're done with sorting the data, you can run the script, and that's what we're gonna do right now in this demo. So I go into my right side panel, look for the import tab, and choose the file to import, which is the one, my export that we saw before. So I click on it and then check the preview to make sure that that's the right file. I see that that's the one that I want, so I just go ahead and import it. Once it's imported, you will see that it stays with the date as the first column. So I use that column to look for my launch date and see at what row it corresponds to. So I see that my launch date was corresponding to row 91. So I use that to set my pre-period and my post-period. So my pre-period here will be from row 1 till 90, and my post-period will be from row 91 till the end. Then I am fine to take away the date. And you will see here that my clicks test becomes the first column, so that I can finally use the impact formula. And once I have plotted the impact, you will see that I can have a pretty graph like this. And if you're lucky, you can too. You will see a nice upward lift, which is a clear winner. Another thing you can do after you plotted the impact is seeing an actual summary that gives you all the details about how much the change affected your variable and if the effect was statistically significant or not. So it's an invaluable tool to just like communicate with your stakeholders accurate results. And finally, we can also plot the effect of the control groups, if we had any control groups, and see if they were a good fit to estimate the impact or not. So the closer they are to the one, the most likely they are to have been used in estimating the model. So I can see here that both control groups I used were good fits. However, one went in one direction and the other went in the direction opposite to the test group. So now you can give it a go yourself. I prepared a script here. You can just copy here, or you can also access it via the slides that will be shared shortly. And finally, what I learned from several tries and errors by running these scripts a lot of times is that, as we said, the date column should always be removed when using this script. The column titles can sometimes error out if they contain special characters such as hyphens, spaces, or capitalized letters. So make sure you have the cleanest title you can have for your columns. And lastly, start small. Start with one test group, for example, and then you can expand your data sets with additional control groups or features once you're comfortable with this one script. And then you can go online and find more scripts. There's a lot that you can develop on. And finally, now that you learned how to use Causal Impact on RStudio to analyze data, I want to make a few points about using statistics to analyze data in the real world. So there's a sentence that I came across recently that I really like, which is statistics can be made to prove anything, even the truth. What does it mean? When we run tests, we work off the digital landscape, which is constantly changing. We don't work with data that have been collected in a sterile lab environment. So there's a number of things that we should be careful about. The first thing is that external events can impact your data, and they will impact your data. So for example, Google algorithm updates. There's also tools tracking failures, whether they're third-party tools or first-hand tools. They might actually impact your data in that way. And there might be engineering releases that overlap with your launch date, for example. So if you're doing a test at the same time as another change has taken place, obviously it's hard to isolate if the impact was solely due to your SEO test or to the engineering release. So my suggestion is to create a working document with the rest of your team to map internal changes such as engineering releases, your own tests, and any other known changes, as well as external events like changes in the algorithm or any other kind of industry news that you find noteworthy, because these will allow you to take into account any other known factors at the same time as your test dates and isolate the treatment in the analysis. Secondly, you will have to mind the outliers because they can massively affect your data. Like in this example, if I was to look only at the third panel, I would assume that this test had a massive positive change. However, obviously, if I look at the first two panels, I can see that there's something quite not right, and this was likely caused by outliers across only a few days. And these outliers can originate from new product launches within the test group. So, if you're testing category pages and there's a new product coming up on those pages that has a lot of interest, that might skew the data a bit more than normal. Then holidays and seasonal events as well. For example, Black Friday or Christmas or any other kind of holidays that normally has a great impact on the performance of some of these pages, and results coming only from one page in the group. So you can see here, if I was to focus only on the grand total, it would be a great change of by 500 5% increase. However, this change only came from one page because everything else was down. And tracking bugs as well, whether it's third party or proprietary tools, they can also affect your data and originate outliers. So you can spot outliers and rule them out by applying a few things. For example, increasing the size of the test group, which will allow for a more reliable data set. Adding control groups as well. They might or might not be used for the model, but they're still a great tool to add. And finally, pre-processing your raw data. For example, you can see here there were a few days where CTRs, impressions and clicks went up massively. So we just had to take those days out. Might not have been the best solution, but it was a good enough solution that allowed us to pass from a graph like this to something a little more reliable like this. That was inconclusive. And third, beware confirmation bias. Obviously, when we're the ones proposing a change and we feel strongly about a change that we want to implement, we want the test to do good. We want the test to confirm our hypothesis. However, sometimes your test will be inconclusive or might even be a loser, even when you thought that it would be a clear winner. So, once you cried a bit, you can also run the test a little longer to allow for more time to see results, or repeat the test with bigger groups. However, if it's still inconclusive, it's probably better to take our losses and our learnings and revert the change and focus on other tests. So, these were some of the resources that I used to build this presentation, so feel free to check them out. And these are my contacts. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly. And thank you so much for listening today. Have a great rest of your SEO day.
That was an insightful presentation from Giulia Panozzo, the founder of Neuroscience. Thanks a million, Giulia, for your exceptional presentation on the topic how to show the impact of your SEO changes with Causal Impact.